everyone, I'm Melissa McAllister, and you're listening to The Melissa Made Show. Now, for decades, I've dedicated myself to helping women break the cycle of dieting, navigate through all the fads, and change their lives through my nutrition coaching. Now, each week, I'm going to talk about everything from deep nutrition, mindset, self-care, the ideal workout routine, tips on how and why to implement intermittent fasting in your life, my favorite recipes that are not only crowd pleasers, but they're actually healthy for you, and so much more. Now, with small and consistent changes, you can defy aging while living a happier, healthier, and more heart-filled life. I'm so excited to show you it's possible with the right strategies that are so simple to adopt. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Melissa Made Show. So today I have a guest that I'm super excited to talk about. And if you watch my stories, I know you do. I've already talked about her. But her staff reached out to me about possibly being on the podcast. And I'm like, I know this one. I know her. And I have had her in my ear for probably almost 2 years now. So let me give her a proper introduction. Her name is Andrea Nakayama, and she's a functional medicine nutritionist, educator, the host of the 15-Minute Matrix podcast, and the founder and former CEO of Functional Nutrition Alliance. Andrea draws on systems biology, mental models, root cause methodology, and the therapeutic partnerships to offer long-awaited solutions for the rapidly growing chronic illness epidemic. After losing her young husband to a brain tumor in 2002, she discovered a passion for using food as personalized medicine and is now regularly consulted as the nutrition expert for the toughest clinical cases in the practices of many world-renowned doctors. She trains nearly 4,000 practitioners each year in her methodologies so that they can too become the last stop for their clients and patients, as well as a trusted referral partner for doctors in her area. Now, on a personal note, I was referred to her schooling from a fellow friend. And I was just going through, you go through Google and you look at all of these schools and you're like, okay, first I had a referral. That means a lot to me, but let me just kind of take a dive. And I fell in love with her. And I was told that one of and I don't know if you know this, Andrea, but one of your best, besides your beautiful brain and your compassion, is your organization. I was told, if you go into this nutritional space, and to become educated and to be able to help other people, but then you just like, it's chaos. And I knew that going through the 10 months of schooling with you would not only expand all of my knowledge, but also organize me, which it did tremendously. So you guys, I've been through the Functional Nutrition Alliance, absolutely loved it. And I just told her I'm going through it for a second time. I enjoyed it that much. And when I go on my walks, she's in my ear right now. She has these wonderful, wonderful things that I'm learning about, especially about sugar. You guys might have heard my reel. Andrea, you can go back and listen to it. I talked about, maybe we can talk about this a little bit later, but how sugar robs, how it's nutrient, it makes you nutrient deficient, how it robs your body of nutrients. That just fascinated me. So I shared that with my following. But this is huge for me to be able to talk to her one-on-one, because I've been listening to her for so long. And Miss Andrea, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on this podcast. As you can tell, I'm excited to have you on. I would love it if you would start by just kind of telling your story about you and your husband and how this whole nutrition thing started and what led you to the path of where you are today.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I'm as thrilled as you are. It's always so exciting for me to speak with people who have been through full body systems and who are putting it to good use. I couldn't ask for anything better. So for me, this journey started with a personal health crisis, as it does for many of us who are in the field. And for me, that was when my husband, Disamu, my late husband, was diagnosed with a very aggressive brain tumor in April of 2000 when I was just 7 weeks pregnant. Prior to that, I was a real foodie. We lived in San Francisco at the time, and we had these elaborate dinner parties with our friends, and we'd shop at the farmer's market. And I was always kind of playing with the realm of nutrition for my own health. Looking back, I think my autoimmunity was brewing at the time, but I didn't know what it was. But I could tell there were things that made me feel better and things that made me feel worse, what in functional medicine we call mediators. And I knew certain things were there. So I was starting to play with it. And then when Isamu, my late husband, was diagnosed, I kind of dove in. There wasn't as much noise in the field as there is now. So there were few books on the topic, but I found a book that really inspired me to start looking more at the healing powers of food. So Isamu was given 6 months to live at the time of his diagnosis. He ended up living little short of 2.5 years. So he was there for my entire pregnancy, obviously, to see our son born, to have a good 19 months with that son who's now 22 and just graduated college, as I told you. And that kind of spurred my passion and my interest. I didn't know then what I know now, but I'm able to use that inspiration to help so many more people with what I now understand are even greater powers of food as medicine. And I don't say that in lieu of medicine. I say it as what I call a yes and. These things work together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it was different back then. You alluded to that. So today it might be a little bit tougher, from Google to Chat GPT to all of these things, WebMD. But how did you start that journey of looking, at the world of nutrition? I mean, what, besides the book, what led you into obviously the proper path to be able to extend his life as much as you did? How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I think back to 2000 to where we are today, there was so much less research and science. So the book I was reading was by Michael Lerner. It was called Choices in Healing, and it was about integrative approaches in cancer. And Michael Lerner was a social activist, and he had founded the Commonweal Collective, which is in the Bay Area. And he was talking about all the different ways in which a patient can be empowered with their own healthcare. And there was only one little chapter on food, and he talked about sugar. And so I started to research the impacts of sugar on tumor progression. And I didn't, like I said, know what I was doing, but I was thinking, wait, we need to shift the environment, the internal terrain, as I would now call it, in which the cancer is growing. Yes, he's going to have radiation, chemotherapy. He had 2 craniotomies, right? He was going through those paces, but I was thinking, how do we combat as much as we can from the procedures and also from the interventions, the medications that he had to take? So that was our starting place, was just me looking at sugar and thinking, okay, what are the effects of sugar? How do we remove sugar? He had a wild sweet tooth. He loved his treats. So I started experimenting with alternatives that wouldn't have the same response, natural alternatives, because there are chemical, artificial alternatives as well. I didn't use those. And we actually shifted our diet to, at that time, eliminate all meat except for fish. So we went pesca vegan. I am no longer pesca. It doesn't serve my body as somebody with Hashimoto's, autoimmunity, but that was what we were doing. And so I was just diving into whole foods eating, which I was already into, but I was kind of going deeper into the health benefits of, at the time, different grains, different fibers, different plant proteins, and really trying to nourish his body through all that it was going through, but also my body. I was pregnant and under a tremendous amount of stress, with pregnancy being a stressor of its own.
So I find that so interesting with the sugar. And in one of my audios that I listened with you, you mentioned that he did have that wild sweet tooth, and it was difficult at first, but you found healthier alternatives for him to kind of be able to enjoy his sweets, but also, work towards, stalling that cancer. Can you share a couple of the things that you created for him or that you gave to him instead of the typical sweets that he was enjoying beforehand?
Yeah, and it's hard to even think back that far because I've created so many more things since then. But there were many alternatives that I could use that where I was making like cardamom tea cakes and nut butter cookies and always working with like fruits and gels. But I was using sweeteners at the time. I was using brown rice syrup. I was using maple syrup. I was using raw honey. So those were the sweeteners I was primarily using at the time. There's actually more available to us now with like coconut sugar and coconut nectar, yacon syrup, which has some good fiber in it. So everything's changed so much in the over 20 years. But since then, I've created so many more things, and there's so much more. I mean, wow, like there's cookbooks and blog articles. There's so much now that I was like starting from scratch. Google didn't work the same way. Like nothing was the same as it is now. Now, if you're deciding that you can't or it doesn't work for your body to eat something, it is just a few keystrokes away that you can find many options.
Yeah. And can I ask you from a functional nutritionist, your thoughts on the natural non-calorie sweeteners and the artificial sweeteners, how that fits into your belief system?
Yeah, so I'm always looking to help, as you know, the terrain of the body, the soil to be as healthy as it can be. So what I want to do for that, so that we can combat as much of the illness as we're facing or experiencing or preventing, is make sure that we're feeding it all natural substances. So if something is chemically derived, then it doesn't support the methods that I'm working with. So by that, I mean a lot of the chemical sweeteners that we might find in little packets at stores or at restaurants in place of natural sweeteners or even of sugar. But refined sugar, I mean by that, but also even the sugar alcohols that are available now. So anything that ends in an "ol", whether it's erythritol or xylitol, those are things that I choose not to have people ingest. If it's in a gum, that is fine. Xylitol in particular has been shown to work really well on dental carriers, but in the body, it can actually cause digestive distress, which too many people have because sugar alcohols bypass normal digestive processes. So I choose to not use the chemical sweeteners or the chemically altered sweeteners and choose instead to use natural sweeteners that are lower glycemic, meaning they spike the blood sugar a little less. So even if we look at honey as an example, a raw honey is going to have more fiber and more nutrient density and have a lower glycemic response than a processed honey, which is going to have all that removed and have a glycemic reaction in the body, meaning the blood sugar rises about the same as a processed sugar. So we're looking to keep that balance in the body, and the chemical sweeteners, unfortunately, don't contribute to those goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to apologize. Andrea, I think you're at home too. I'm recording at home and I have my little leaf blower, of course, right under my window.
I don't even hear it.
Okay,
Can't even hear it.
Yeah, because it's always so beautifully quiet out here. And I'm like, of course. But I'm grateful because I love having a clean landscape. You touched on, chronic illness and autoimmune disorders. Can you kind of shed light on, I guess, the lack of a better word, it seems to be a growing concern these days.
Yeah.
And I know you've battled Hashimoto's yourself. Can you just share a little bit on, your thoughts on kind of where we are when it comes to autoimmune disorders, and maybe how sometimes it's hard for people to get that diagnosis and then to be treated properly, and what we do to help combat that?
Yeah, so much in there. So I think a lot of times people don't understand the difference between acute and chronic care. And our medical system is very good at working with acute conditions. So a broken arm, a heart attack, even cut the cancer out of the body as much as you can get out of it. There have been incredible advancements in acute care that we want to be able to celebrate. However, our medical system isn't very equipped at working with chronic health conditions. And chronic health conditions are where we are sick and not getting better. Those niggling things that just won't go away with the tried and true methods, or things like autoimmunity that keep compounding and we don't know what's going on and we're striving and striving and striving to find some answers. And because our medical system works in what I call an X for Y model, when that doesn't work, they sort of don't know what to do. And oftentimes, particularly with women, they will offer some mental health treatment because it seems like it's in the person's head, just because it's outside of their realm of understanding. I often see in full body systems in the training, a lot of nurses. We have a lot of nurses come through, and they're some of my favorite students. But in the beginning, it's very difficult for them because that X for Y methodology is what they're used to. Here's the diagnosis, here's the protocol. What happens when that doesn't work? And the people for whom that is occurring, the X for Y does not work, is growing quickly. And so these people are left as an underserved population. Autoimmunity in general, we're seeing about 80 million diagnosed people in the United States alone. This is so many people. And then there's a lot of people walking around with undiagnosed autoimmunity. 75% of those people are female. And so we're also looking at a high percentage of women who are looking and seeking and searching. And so that is on the rise for a number of reasons that, if we have time, we can talk about. And on top of that, they're looking for solutions, don't get the treatment that they need, seek and seek and seek, get stuck in this, what I call sympathetic dominant state, that constant searching, and don't know how to get any answers. And that becomes frustration upon frustration upon frustration. So this is the situation that we're in. And you asked, how are they diagnosed? One of the problems with many autoimmune conditions is that there isn't a clear diagnosis. It's more of an umbrella of symptoms, a cluster of symptoms that then receive a diagnosis based on that clustering, as opposed to here's one marker on a lab, you get this diagnosis. So it also takes a highly trained practitioner to be able to find that diagnosis. And unfortunately, the diagnosis doesn't lead to a treatment that's going to fix it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really stood out, was really trying to work with people and just interview them and really understand on a very deep level how you're feeling, what these symptoms are. And then that's where you start. And you have the 3 root many causes.
Branches.
Many
branches.
Yes, which I love, which is the genes,
digestion,
and don't tell me genes, digestion, and tell me.
Inflammation, genes, digestion, inflammation,
which is huge. And obviously, genes will always be there, but we have the ability to obviously turn on and turn off genes. I just finished another course. I went through Restoration Wellness. I went through their gastrointestinal course and learned a lot about the gut, which I did very well, thanks to you. I already had such a great foundation. And can we talk about that a little bit, especially, with the Hashimoto's stuff? Because that seems to be one of the very first things that needs to be addressed when someone doesn't feel well or can't lose weight or doesn't sleep well. We start with digestion, with the gut. And in your experience, how important that is because I'll be honest with you, most of my clients come to me and it's their first inclination is my hormones are off. They will always think that it's a hormone issue. And I'm like, well, can we check the gut first? And then we'll move on to hormones, but your own personal experience.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And we should look at how the hormones are a branch and not a root, right? That's where we actually have to establish those roots and the soil that surrounds those roots. So in that model that you're talking about, what I ask people to do is list any sign, symptom, or diagnosis that they're experiencing. And then I'm going to help them understand that that's a branch. It's an outcome of what's happening inside. If we go and try to just address the branches and we don't address what's causing those branches to occur, we're missing the opportunity for sustainable healing. And so we want to go deeper to the trunk, deeper still to the roots, those 3 roots that we identified, the genes, digestion, and inflammation, and then to the roots that the soil that those roots exist in. You have leaf blowers. I have jet lag. We'll figure it all out. Okay, so the roots, the genes, digestion, and inflammation, and then we influence the health of each of those roots. So as you said, the genes are always there, but we have the epigenetics, the factors that influence the genes, and that includes the food, the movement, the environment, and the mindset. And as you speak about, Melissa, with food, we have the quality, the quantity, the diversity, and the timing. All of those things matter as influencers for the food. But if we go to digestion, like you're asking about, I believe we cannot talk about food without talking about digestion. Digestion is where food meets physiology. So many people could be eating what they think of as the quote unquote best or the quote unquote healthiest diet ever. That doesn't mean that they're not malnourished, because digestion needs to be optimized to process and receive, digest and absorb everything that's coming into the body. So we have to optimize digestion in order to talk about food. If we're not, we're missing great opportunities. In addition, digestion and therefore auxiliary digestive function, which has to do with the liver, is really critical for hormone function. So hormone issues are a branch, and we still come back to the genes, digestion, and inflammation. When we speak about hormones, we need to create our hormones, we need to transport our hormones, we need to utilize our hormones, and we need to excrete our hormones. And my concern with the heightened attention on hormones these days, because a lot of influencers are talking about hormone therapy, which I am all for in the right circumstances, is that if we put more into a system that isn't eliminating what it doesn't need, we are retoxing, not detoxing. And so digestion and therefore liver support, which is auxiliary and downstream from digestion, needs to be addressed if somebody wants to talk about their hormones. If somebody's not sleeping and they're not pooping and their blood sugar is not balanced and they want to talk about hormones, they're going to feel worse working on their hormones than they are better. And I think, again, people think it's a quick fix. They're thinking through that acute care model versus the chronic health condition.
Are you ready to learn the secret behind how I continue to be so healthy? Well, it all comes down to science. If you've been listening to my show for a while now, you may have heard me mention something called the MAID diet. Yes, that's right, because I'm so passionate about how learning about the effects that nutrition has on the human body, I always seek to learn as much as I can and apply that knowledge. One of my best learning tools has been self-experimentation. And now in my late 40s, I have to say, I've done a pretty good job. It's hard to find trustworthy, even accurate information in this country. Between the influence of big corporations with monetary agendas, the nutrition labels designed to deceive, and downright misleading information that you were taught in school, navigating food and nutrition with your optimum health in mind can be quite challenging. Take the food pyramid, for example. In an ideal world, I'm sure we would all love to eat pasta and baguettes for every meal, but that's simply not what's best for our bodies, our health, and our longevity. Now, I spent years developing the MAID diet in a way that I wish someone had taught me, and I break it all down in my MAID diet course. People are always asking me what I eat, so we start there. What I eat in a day and which foods are the most beneficial. So think something in between the Mediterranean and the paleo diet. It's a lifestyle plan that incorporates moderate protein, adequate fat, decreased carbs, and an introduction to intermittent fasting. But please, I want you to keep in mind, just because I say decrease carbs, I don't mean decrease carbs in what your body needs. I just mean decrease carbs in what the standard American diet has become. You still get plenty of quality carbohydrates, just not in the mass amounts we have been eating to get us into such an unhealthy state. And of course, we're going to talk about what foods to avoid because that's just as important. We even talk about how to eat healthy on the go because let's face it, we're busy and that's just life. And then there's intermittent fasting. I share all of my favorite tips and tricks and a lot of science are along the way. I could not say enough good things about intermittent fasting, and I'm honestly so surprised more people aren't doing it. You'll also learn how I've learned to balance my hormones and feel my best because so many women struggle with this. And lastly, we cover the mindset behind making a change because we all know that your mindset is the key to your success in anything that you do. So if you are struggling with diet in terms of feeling your best or you are ready to take your health to the next level, I strongly recommend you check out this course. Now, the course is structured in 5 modules, 16 lessons, and a whole lot of research to back everything up. So I want you to visit my website, themaiddiet.com or melissamaid.com, and you will see a tab for the course. Click on that to get access today and learn why you should be eating this way too. See, you guys, I told her beforehand, she's such a great teacher. Thank you. That was a great explanation. So I always try to get in the heads of my listeners. And I'm like, what do they want to ask Andrea right now? And talking about digestion, what can you give us some examples in all of your years of work of digestive symptoms, I guess, what is somebody when they're not feeling well and they really can't pinpoint it themselves? What would lead them to believe that, this is a digestive issue?
Yeah, I mean, there's the obvious digestive symptoms like constipation, diarrhea, heartburn or GERD, feeling full even when you haven't eaten, feeling hungry all the time. Like there's a lot of digestive issues that we could experience, bloating, gas, right? So there's the obvious. I don't have obvious digestive issues regularly, but I have autoimmunity. I have Hashimoto's. So I still know that my digestion needs support because that model, 3 roots, many branches, reminds me that my Hashimoto's is a branch and I am better served by looking at those roots. So each of those roots has that soil or that circle of influence. And I like to think about the mechanical, the chemical, the structural, and the microbial. This is another place where I think people jump to the microbial because it's very sexy, but we're not thinking about the fact that we need to chew, right? So sometimes we just need to literally break it down. And that means the concepts, but also the food. We need to break it down in order to utilize it. So chewing is a mechanical process. If we are sitting down in the rest and digest state, which is the parasympathetic state, we're able to better take in the food. We produce the chemicals we need to break down those complex chemical structures in our food. And then we're better able to utilize what we're bringing in. So again, mechanical, chew, chemical, this is where we have our hydrochloric acid to break down our proteins, our enzymes that we can get from our raw and live foods that we eat. Structural, this is where we start to build the barrier systems in our body. And the microbial is always working and being informed by all of those things. So to go back to your question, what can we do? I really invite people to create a food, mood, poop journal. Mood, I put in quotation marks, and that just means any sign or symptom. And just capture 3 to 5 days without analyzing. Do not analyze, just capture. And for some people, this is very triggering, and I would say do not do it. If you cannot track your food, do not track your food. This is not for everybody. If you're able to say this is an experiment, I'm just putting stuff down on paper or in an app, and then I'm going to go back and look at it, see if you can make any correlation between your food, your mood, meaning again, any sign or symptom, gas, bloating, whatever it is, diarrhea, constipation, and your poop. What is it that you could look back at and say, wow, I actually ate more fiber that day. I ate a salad and my poop was better. So there are little things we could then do to bring what we're doing already to awareness. And Melissa, I don't know about you, but I feel like people are stuck on looking for the answer outside of themselves. And I believe the answers are actually inside of there's so much to glean. You are the influencer of you. And so if you can look inside and just take a step back, there's going to be information there that helps you make a next step forward.
I love that. That's quotable. So I just finished a book. I don't have it in front of me. Her name is Maggie. I'm not sure her last name, but it's about inflammation, ironically. And she's a functional nurse practitioner. And it was Eat for Your Inflammation Type, I think. Excellent book. And she's very adamant. Speaking of influencers, she's not an influencer. She's incredibly educated. But speaking of influencers, I feel like there's kind of this battle right now, this social media battle. But my whole point of that, and getting to asking you this question, it seems like a lot of the schools that I go through, just with the RWS, reading Maggie's book, what are your thoughts on the things like, I don't know if I need to include sugar in this or not, but things like dairy and gluten, and, I guess I should, like, some people are just adamant about saying you need to get that out of your diet because it's inflammatory. It's, it doesn't serve you. It causes more people, symptoms than it's worth. And then from what I've learned from Dr. Itz, he's like, eh. So just in your professional opinion, because everybody has one, and you can ultimately go which way serves you the best, obviously. But I would love, especially since you're so good at clearing the air on these kind of things, your thoughts on these types of foods, and if it's worth having them in the diet, or you think that more people should eliminate them or have them in extreme moderation for their health.
So I know that that I am always looking at bioindividuality and thinking about who are we speaking to. And as I was mentioning, I'm in the process of rewriting every stitch of content in the curriculum to be more inclusive, because I think it's really important that we think about the who are we speaking to. Are those foods bad for everybody? No. I'm speaking mostly to people who are sick and not getting better. That is my niche market. That is who I speak to the best. And that is who I'm really passionate about serving, because I believe it's an underserved population. I do not believe that these restricted diets will do the trick on their own. I think it's a yes and I think there are ways that we can support the body with both the inclusion of certain foods as well as the exclusion of certain foods. And that's going to be unique for each individual. And there are some foods that are more inflammatory than others. So if we look at just refined sugar to stay in that situation, there is research, and there was over 20 years ago when I was looking at it with Isamu's health, my late husband's health, that shows that refined sugar in certain amounts can change gene expression, contribute to inflammation, cause nutrient depletion for a variety of reasons, and really particular nutrients like magnesium and potassium that are already depleted for many Americans at least, and cause certain immune cell suppression. So if we know that is true about that substance in large quantities, for me, with somebody who has an immune issue, it's a no-brainer to look at the fact that it would be helpful to eliminate or reduce the consumption of that food. We then have to look at what is that person's access to being able to do that? What is their starting place? Is that triggering for them in a certain way? And let's look at what those triggers are and what they're fearful of in terms of eliminating a food. How do we crowd that out and make sure we bring in more nutrient dense foods? So I would say that with each of those things, I can talk about gluten, I can talk about dairy. Those do have physiological impacts on the body, particularly a body that is already compromised. That's just science. And I think that one of the things that drives me crazy about social media is that it's very fixated on the fix as opposed to the science, the physiological science. When people ask me about what I'm teaching, I'm teaching you how the body works as a way to uncover what somebody might be experiencing. I'm not teaching you how to read a lab test and then treat a number. I'm not teaching you a protocol for a condition, because it doesn't work like that. So for me, those foods can be inflammatory in the quote unquote appropriate system, and we have to tier our approach to make sense for every individual. So if you're listening to this and you're anti-diet culture, I'm right there with you. There shouldn't be any dieting. And there are ways to live away with a lifestyle, a dietary pattern that is supportive of you. And that's a risk-reward conversation. I don't eat sugar because it makes my eyes puff up, and I don't want puffy eyes where I can't see and be my best self every day, right? I'm sure it has other impacts, but that's a very visible impact for me. And so that's a risk-reward situation. And I will see it the very next day. So sometimes when things are a longer term goal, like, oh, I'm helping my immune system, I don't feel that. It's harder to make a decision. But when we have immediate results, that risk reward quotient kind of shifts a little bit.
Totally agree with that. There is that I have it too, that battle of instant gratification versus the delayed gratification. And if you can make that delayed gratification as undelayed as possible, someone that opportunity to be able to handle those instant gratifications better, because they know there's a short-term, delayed gratification on its way, which, I mean, I would assume the puffy eyes happen shortly after. I mean, not immediately when you eat the sugar, but shortly after.
Next morning.
Yeah. No, close enough that you're like, okay, this isn't worth it now. And I wanted to kind of, you teed me up for asking you about, I always know a trend is coming because my inbox gets inundated with people asking me about this product. And right now, and I'm not asking you to explain this particular product, but it's the one that's in my inbox right now. Colostrum is the new thing, because everybody will ask me, what are your thoughts on colostrum? And so there's always a trend. There's always a diet. There's always some sort of new superfood or supplement out there that's coming out. How do you teach, and how do you help people navigate all of the noise out there? And they do a great job. My husband this morning, and my husband exaggerates. Those that know my husband know he does. He exaggerates everything, but he said that there's some popular pill right now that's circulating that he's seen on Instagram where you can lose 40 pounds in like 14 days. And I'm like, what? I haven't seen that. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh no. But how to, help clients just weed it out, because it sounds so promising. And you've even got these testimonials that will tell you it worked for me and it was fantastic. And this superfood saved my life and all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan, and I'm, writing a book now, and I'm working with a case study group, and I am a big fan of reminding people to slow it down, to speed it up. So oftentimes when we're looking to those things, they're quick fixes, and we think they're going to get us there quickly, but they never do. If they did, it would be everybody would be feeling different. We wouldn't have growing rates of autoimmunity. We would have declining rates of autoimmunity. We wouldn't have growing rates of mental health concerns and cancer and diabetes. That would all be on the reverse if it was that easy. Unfortunately, the body is very complex. So colostrum, as an example, I'm a fan of a colostrum in a healing protocol for the appropriate person. When we go back to that digestive circle of influence, the soil, and we go to mechanical, chemical, structural, and microbial, the colostrum is one agent that helps with that structural integrity of the digestive system. However, if somebody is really reactive to dairy in any form, then that's not going to be a healing agent for them. So this is why you will never hear me on a podcast, on a summit, talking about supplements or protocols, because I believe that people are then self-treating and possibly doing damage because we're not, as patients, and I'll say we because we're all patients, focusing on the things we do know and can tap into. We're taking all these things that we actually don't know are appropriate for us, and they could even be epigenetically changing our genetic expression because we don't need that, but we think we do because we're self-diagnosing. So I am a fan of colostrum. I have a podcast episode with Dr. Marvin Singh on colostrum, and it's very helpful in a healing protocol for the appropriate person at the appropriate time. And I've certainly used it in practice, and my team continues to, but I wouldn't just run out and start using colostrum if you aren't working on something specific that you have help on, knowing it's right for you and your body.
I love that. So would you recommend, all my listeners listening to this and seeing, an ad for a supplement or, a new extract or superfood, they learn more about it that's unbiased? I mean, is that where you?
Yeah. Well, I think if it's something like an actual food, right? Like if you're learning about goji berries, like go ahead and that's fine. And you're like, oh, I want to put some goji berries in my water, or I want some cacao, that's good benefits, or I want to eat ghee. Like if it's food-based, I would go ahead and say like, experiment with those things. That's super fun. And you can be adding what I call magic sprinkles to the way that you're already eating, right? That's beautiful. If you want to eat more sprouts or you're bringing things in like that, once something is therapeutically related, that's where I would say put a pause on it until you're getting appropriate advice and recommendation, and try things one at a time. Because what I see a lot of practitioners do is give people many supplements or many things at once, and then that person doesn't feel well and they don't know what changed, or they do feel better, but then they're stuck with taking all of those things and they don't know what was the benefit, which thing benefited them. So I like to think through a very scientific method. And ironically, in healthcare, we've lost the scientific method, which means you bring in one thing, you see how that works. You bring in another thing, you see how that works. You have to be tracking all those things. Otherwise, you don't know. So I would say if it's a therapeutic supplement, hold off until you get the appropriate recommendation. If you're curious, that's a good indicator to say like, oh, colostrum, that's being touted as helping with XYZ. Why am I concerned about XYZ? Who can I talk to about XYZ? Is there anything I can do on my own to support XYZ? Oh, that helps with my digestive system. I can eat more fiber. I can try some sauerkraut, right? There's these food things we could be doing, but we bypass those things and skip to the therapeutic interventions. I think we all forgot how to be patients, like a patient who actually has a lot more self-influence than we recognize in what's in our scope as patients. We're playing outside of our scope.
Ah, I love that. So in your work, you talk about, and I believe I'm saying this right, omics, which is,
Omics.
yeah, how kind of, I think you might have already touched on that, but how one person will react to something completely different than another, and how we have to keep that in mind when it comes to our own healing journeys. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So my mantra for all I do is everything is connected. We are all unique and all things matter. And everything is based, everything ties back to that mantra. Everything's connected. We are all unique. All things matter. Everything is connected is the realm of omics. It's systems biology. It's the microbiome, the proteome, the genome, the epigenome. There's all these omics today that are helping us understand interconnections. And that's why the name of my curriculum is Full Body Systems. It's based on systems biology. So earlier I was talking about the hormones and the connection to digestion and the liver, detoxification. We can't look at the body in isolation, and omics reminds us of that. So everything is connected, helps us understand that the gut's connected to the brain, which we know these days, but the gut's connected to the hormone, which is connected to detoxification, which is connected to environmental inputs. The structural integrity impacts our hormones, impacts our neurohormones, inflammation. It's all connected. And that's really that realm of omics. Everything's connected. We are all unique reminds us of precision medicine, and all things matter reminds us of epigenetics. So again, I'm looking to what science is telling us and using those modalities of science to say, this is how we should actually be caring for ourselves and others, by borrowing from these areas of science instead of working in these isolated ways.
Love that. I, like I was saying, go through my walks, and I'm now listening to your talks on sugar. Fascinating. And I had already gone through one that you call fat or fiction. And of course, I absolutely love, because still to this day, when I will sit with a client and we will go through our food and poop journal, a lot of times I see a very large lack of fat. They're usually, women like myself that are in their 40s that grew up in those 80s. Or they could even be this younger generation who grew up with, moms who were fearful of fat. And you did of course, it's just chock full of science, chock full of science. But other than that, just taking that deep breath and understanding that fat is an essential part of a human body. Do you have just a few sentences to help my audience understand the importance of course, all three macronutrients, but to not fear the fat, and, don't eat the chicken breast and the broccoli.
Yeah, it's so important. And hopefully it's chock full of science and story. I think there's some great stories in that fat class, right? Like there's some really interesting history in there. I always say the mantra that I have for how we eat is fat, fiber, protein. So at every meal, make sure you have fat, fiber, protein. Every meal or snack. Where's my fat? Where's my fiber? Where's my protein? And then I think where we got confused with fat, we got confused with fat in a lot of places along history, but one of them is that all kinds of fats were lumped together, and there are different fats that work differently on the body. So it's really important, again, for our hormones, if we're concerned about our hormones, to make sure that we have the backbone of hormones, which is cholesterol. The cholesterol molecule is really important. And so where does that come from? It comes from our whole food, healthy fats. So really getting our fats into our diet, whether that comes from fatty fishes, nuts and seeds, olive oil, olives, avocados, eggs, if you can tolerate them. Those are all really beneficial foods. I, Melissa, find that I don't do well on a high fat diet. That doesn't feel right for my body. So I think we have to tune in to the diet fads, because high fat diet on the flip side of low fat diet is very popular these days. And that just doesn't feel right in my body. And I can't get enough protein or fiber when I increase that fat that much. So there's a lot of individuality in there. I'm sharing my experience because I think a lot of women now think they have to go keto to lose weight. And it's not, for me, it has the opposite effect. So really just tuning in and that tracking and paying attention in a not dieting way, but in a curious way helps us to also heal our relationship with our food, which is nutrition, which is about growth, metabolism, and repair. Nutrition isn't about dieting. So fat in these whole healthy forms is really critical for our brain function, for our hormone function, for our cell repair, and we don't want to leave it out of the equation.
Yeah, 100%. I spoke with someone who just messaged me yesterday, and keto carnivore-ish, and it was that real talk of where's the fiber, where's the leafy greens, because she had gotten markers of oxidative LDL and didn't understand where that was coming from. And I said, we need some antioxidants in that diet. So I'm a huge proponent as well for, lots of colorful fruits and vegetables and fiber. I have is it a loaded question for you?
Ooh.
Maybe,
Ooh.
maybe knowing you'll be able to rattle it right off. But say that I have a listener that's tuned in to the very end of our podcast and is like, okay, love her, which I understand. Love her. And I would love to just ask her, Andrea, where do I start?
I think it's really important that we slow it down to speed it up. So I'm going to remind folks like that food, mood, poop journal is your friend if it is your friend. So just being able to look at, wait a minute, what am I? What is coming into my body? And I'm not getting enough colors. But the 3 rules that I have around eating, which I think are a great way to start, is number 1, fat, fiber, protein. Just play for a week with what did I eat? What am I about to eat? And what can I add? So if you're eating a banana, maybe you put a little nut butter with it and you add a sprinkling of hemp seeds and you've got fat, fiber, protein. So it becomes playful to bring in instead of excluding. That's principle number 1, fat, fiber, protein. Principle number 2, and you can start at any place, start with 2, start with 1, is to eat the rainbow. So I love having people, as you know, keep that food, mood, poop journal and then go back and say, what colors did I eat? It's a fun thing to do with your kids if you have little ones. It's a really playful thing for me to do with myself. Whenever I'm doing an open house for full body systems, I track it that day and I often ask the participants to fill in the blanks for me. Oh, I didn't eat purple. What can I eat today? And it's really fun to see, what am I eating and where do I bring in more color? And then again, we're adding instead of subtracting. Principle number 3 is to know your yes, no, maybe list. And that yes, no, maybe list is based on your body's response, not on your should, shouldn't list. So that's again, in functional medicine, we call those our mediators. And our mediators are what makes me feel better, what makes me feel worse. When you know those things, you are more empowered. So if you can, write down your yes, no, maybe list. Yes, foods I know make me feel awesome. No, foods I know don't make me feel so great for whatever reason, like me and the refined sugar and the puffy eyes. And maybe, you know what, I'm not sure. Sometimes when I eat this, I feel like this. Sometimes I feel just fine. that actually gives you something to go work with somebody like you, Melissa, with, and be able to go in and say, this is where I am at this point and I don't understand. And we have something to start working with. So 3 principles are where to start. And you could start with just one of them: fat, fiber, protein, eat the rainbow, yes, no, maybe list. And I think that's a great way to just be in our own experience without looking outside for solutions and ignoring what our body is telling us.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Very powerful. I have to take notes. I wanted to know, I did know you're writing a book. When is your book going to be?
Oh my goodness. Probably 2025 at this point. But it will be for the patient audience. And again, the people who are sick and not getting better. That is my passion place. So yeah.
That's exciting.
You'll have to have me back.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I'm very excited for that book. I love me a good book. So Andrea, I won't take any more of your time. It's been fabulous. I would love if you would share with my audience all the places that they could find you. I bragged about you, I think it was last week, about and how much I enjoyed it. So obviously there's that option. Yes. If you want 10 months of Andrea, it was a tremendous, very well paced, very organized, like I said. And when I used to teach, totally off subject, but I used to teach group exercise. And I knew in that classroom that the people up in front were my visuals, the people that were just, pretty much scattered everywhere were the kinesthetic. And then my audibles were in the back. And that was me. I have to listen. I don't have to watch you do something. I have to hear it. And that is how you teach. And maybe that's why it was so well received with me. And I feel like I've learned so much from you, so much that it was so impactful that I'm doing it again. Learned so much from you, but I love you guys listening to the podcast. 99% of you are listening because there is that. And that's how most of the school is done auditory. And it's just crazy good. So cool. So undistracting. So I wanted to personally thank you for that, because that really resonated with me. But can you share with everybody where they can just follow you, learn more about you, and keep in touch with you for when your book does come out?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity and that invite. So AndreaNakayama.com will lead you to all the places. So if you just go to AndreaNakayama.com, I'm working on a gift there so people can get on that mailing list, but also on social, AndreaNakayama.com will, of course, share this episode with my audience as well. And that'll lead you back to the Functional Nutrition Alliance and the 15-Minute Matrix podcast. So from AndreaNakayama.com, lots of A's, you will find your way to all the places.
Yay. And I have never been able to personally tell you how sorry I am for the loss of your husband.
Thank you.
Oh, what a tragedy turned into just something so beautiful, and you being able to help so much. He has to be so proud.
I call it post-traumatic growth, and I hope he is proud of me and of our son, our graduate.
I would love to personally keep in touch with you if possible, and we will certainly have you back on the podcast. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome, you guys. As always, I hope that you wake up feeling prepared and you go to bed feeling proud. Have a great day. Wow, we've reached the end. But before I leave you, I'd love to hear from you. After all, it's not every day that someone reaches out and asks for your opinion. And to me, your opinion does matter. So please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this message. And remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. My name is Melissa McAllister. And until next time, thank you for being your own health advocate.